This week's Sci-Fi Buzz goes under the sea, so prepare to dive. Hey Buzzers, this is no Little Mermaid adventure. This week we're diving into a deep discussion with Dr. Robert Ballard, scientific advisor for SeaQuest DSV. Robert Downey Jr.'s romantic fantasy adventure, what Harlan Ellison really does for a living, and Bruce Campbell and the Army of Darkness invades video stores.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
Crew, we are taking on water. I can feel it. Somebody left the hatches open. Hi, I'm Mike Jarek. Welcome to Sci-Fi Buzz. This show seems to be sinking before we even get started here, but we will fix that by swimming over to the new Steven Spielberg TV series called SeaQuest DSV. I guess they shouldn't have freed Willie. Ooh. Is anybody out there buying this whole underwater premise? I didn't think so. All right, cut the special effects. Let's get serious here. SeaQuest series consultant Robert Ballard recently talked with us, and I do mean recently because right now he's on the high seas trying to set up a rendezvous with the Lusitania. Yep, it's the same Robert Ballard who found and explored the Titanic. Dr. Bob Ballard developed his love for the sea as an inquisitive youth growing up in San Diego, California. Decades later, he's emerged as a modern-day Captain Nemo, forging over 100 underwater expeditions under the auspices of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. His most important discovery was made in 1985. Let's talk about the Titanic a little bit. Well, how did you first see it?
I saw it with robots initially. Discovered it with robots and then went down the next year in a submarine and landed on the deck. And clunk, clunk, and took on a 10-degree list, as this ship had a 10-degree list. And then we had a little robot named Jason Jr., that we flew out and then down the grand staircase and into one of the rooms, and there was a chandelier. Unbelievable.
Now, what were you thinking and feeling at that point?
I was a kid in a candy closet, you know. I mean, the ability to use this technology to make wonderful discoveries, to go where no one has ever gone before, and that's what we're going to do with SeaQuest.
The recon party is ready. We can get underway.
Would the captain like to take the helm?
Oh, I think you can handle that, Commander.
Thank you, sir.
SeaQuest DSV, that stands for Deep Submergence Vehicle, stars Roy Scheider as the maverick captain of a high-tech submarine 25 years in the future. His character, Captain Nathan Bridger, bears a striking resemblance to series consultant Ballard.
So what does a consultant do on a show like this?
The key was to make this believable. My world is exploration. I've spent 30 years exploring beneath the sea, developing advanced technology. So my job was to make sure they didn't break the laws of physics, that it was credible. We consider this more a show of faction, a blending of science fiction with fact, with true fact. We want it to be entertaining. We want people to love it. But we want them to walk away learning about the ocean and learning about what the future may hold for them.
We really don't know that much about the ocean, do we? The general public.
No, in fact, the next generation of children, the SeaQuest generation of children, will explore more of Earth than all previous generations combined. We know more about Venus now. We have better maps of Venus than of Earth, okay? And so this is the last frontier, is our own planet.
When asked about his current project slate, Ballard overflowed with enthusiasm, and for good reason. Much of his life is being recaptured on TV each week in SeaQuest DSV. He's just come off a successful exploration of Guadalcanal with National Geographic. It's full speed ahead on the Lusitania expedition, and he's looking to the future.
By the time SeaQuest occurs, the Titanic will be an international park, and we'll visit it with robots. Just like you go to Pearl Harbor now and look at the Arizona. The ocean preserves history. The deep sea preserves history. There's more human history preserved in the deep sea than all the museums of the world.
What? A summer fantasy film that's worth seeing? We think so. Next.
It has been a great summer at theaters for science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and one of our producers, who thinks she's a critic apparently now, Susan Hyman, is here to tell us about Heart and Souls. You think it was great, huh?
Well, you know, somebody in the office had seen it. They said they cried through the whole thing, and that just didn't sound like something that was my kind of movie, but I went to a screening the other night, and lo and behold, my floodgates opened as well.
Really? I'm sorry. You gonna be all right?
Yes, but it was a very sweet fantasy, and I
Really?
do recommend it.
God, the man's tense, you know what I mean?
Actor Robert Downey Jr.'s flair for physical acting earned him an Oscar nomination in Chaplin. Now in the romantic fantasy Heart and Souls, he's stretching physicality to the limit. Downey plays a human whose body is inhabited by 4 stubborn spirits.
Some of just the people coming in and out of my body and trying to make it different with each one so that it wasn't like, okay, who's he doing now? That looks like, oh, he's doing Milo again. Oh, now he's doing meh. I just thought there's so many opportunities in this film for me to make an absolute schmuck out of myself.
Don't you give me attitude, I'm a mother.
Downey found there are both pros and cons to playing multiple personalities.
Well, the advantages are you can be neurotic and people think you're in character. And the disadvantages are when you just plain don't know what the hell you're doing.
Director Ron Underwood was able to steer Downey and his tag-along spirits through treacherous waters. The actors found themselves most reliant on Underwood during the film's special effects sequences.
It's so easy in movie making because of the mechanical nature of the process to let effects sort of take over and have it become an effects movie. And I really didn't want that. I wanted a natural quality and an uninterrupted quality to the effects that I feel we achieved.
Oh my God.
Using computer animation and the effects team at Pacific Data Images, Underwood was able to prevent his fantasy from appearing too effects-ridden. That's something that would have been difficult to accomplish with some of Hollywood's more dated visual techniques.
It was a wonderful, freeing experience for me as a director to work with computer animation because it allows for a lot more creative flexibility. Most of the effects were done on the set with all the actors present, and it allows for better performances primarily because they're all really there together and you don't have that artificial kind of blue screen feeling.
That's not to say the entire shoot ran like a dream. At times, actress Kira Sedgwick found it tough to get a heavenly handle on her role.
You know, Ron, he kept drilling it into me. She's ethereal, she's an angel, so, you know, I tried to do that thing.
Illuminating a spirited aura wasn't the only challenge for Sedgwick. The actress was none too pleased being strapped to a harness 25 feet above the ground during the film's celestial flying scenes.
It's, you know, tough. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
Actor Tom Sizemore, who plays the oh-so-cool spirit Milo, had a hard time keeping that image from crashing during his above-the-ground pursuits. Luckily, fellow flyer Charles Grodin bravely offered himself as a vertigo crutch.
I just stared at Charles the whole time, and he just would tell me not to look down and give me certain reassuring looks, although later he told me he was terrified. But I was openly terrified. He was, you know, quietly terrified. And then when we were finished, he was openly terrified also.
Well, one person's horror can be another's delight. So if stellar fantasies are your cup of tea, Heart and Souls has the elements to send you soaring. The imagination of Harlan Ellison after this disconnect.
I'm Alan David Laska, calling from Richardson, Texas. There's this great book I would recommend people to read called The Dictionary of Imaginary Places, written by Alberto Manguel and Diana Guadalupe. It's a great reference book listing places such as Middle-earth, Oz, and Fantasia. It has pictures of these places along with great detailed maps.
A quick reminder to give us a call at the Buzzboard line. Sci-Fi Buzz commentator Harlan Ellison. Here is a man who manages to stimulate and make us angry each week. But if you're someone who doesn't know about Harlan's literary skills, well, he has a very unusual offering for you this time.
a man came to me with fabulous paintings. Jim Cowan, the publisher at Morpheus, for whom I had done an introduction to the H.R. Giger book, came to me and he said, I've come upon a little Polish artist named Jacek Jurka. Lives with his family in the woods, and he paints. And they're wonderful paintings, and I'm going to do a book of them, 30 of them. Will you do the introduction? And I said, I'm up to here with doing introductions. I'm really tired of it. And then I said, let me look at the paintings, and he let me look at them. And they took my breath away. They seemed to me to be an astonishing meld of Magritte and Dali and dreamers and surrealists down through the years. And I said to Jim Cowan, no, I won't do an introduction, but I will write one story around each painting. One of these little paintings I called Susan, and I wrote it about my wife and about my marriage. I'm going to read you a story. The story is from Mindfields. You'll see the illustration around which I wrote the story, and the story, like my wife's name, is called Susan. As she had done every night since they had met, she went in bare feet in a cantaloupe meat-colored night shift to the shore of the Sea of Mist, the verge of the ocean of smothering vapor, the edge of the bewildering haze he called the brim of obscurity. Though they spent all of their daytime together, at night he chose to sleep alone in a lumpy Volkswagen-shaped bed at the southernmost boundary of the absolutely lovely forest in which their home had been constructed. There, at the border between the verdant woods and the brim of obscurity that stretched on forever, a sea of fog that roiled and swirled itself into small, murmuring vortexes from which depths one could occasionally hear something like a human voice pleading for absolution, or at least a back scratcher to relieve this awful itch. He had made his bed, and there, with the nightlight from his old nursery and his old vacuum tube radio that played nothing but big band dance music from the 1920s, and a few favorite books, and a little fresh fruit he had picked on his way from the house to his resting place, he slept peacefully every night, except for the nightmares, of course. And as she had done every night for the 8 years since they had met, she went barefoot and charmed down to the edge of the sea of fog to kiss him goodnight. That was their ritual. That was their right. Before he had even proposed marriage, he explained to her the nature of the problem. Well, the curse, really. Not so much a problem, because a problem was easy to reconcile. Just trim a little nub off here, just smooth that plane over there, just let this bit dangle here, and it'll all meet in the center. No, it wasn't barely remotely something that could be called problem. It was a curse, and he was open about it from the first. My nightmares come to life, he had said, which remark thereupon initiated quite a long and detailed conversation between them. It went through all the usual stages of good-natured chiding, disbelief, ridicule, short-lived anger, at the possibility he was making fun of her, you see, toying with her, on into another kind of disbelief, argument with recourse to logic and Occam's razor, grudging acceptance, a brief lapse into incredulity, a return to the barest belief, and finally, with trust, utter acceptance that he was telling her nothing less than the truth. Remarkably, to say the least, his nightmares assumed corporeal shape and stalked the night as he slept, dreaming them up. It wouldn't have been so bad, except my nightmares killed and ate my first 4 wives, he had said. He'd saved that part for the last. But she married him nonetheless, and they were extremely happy. It was a terrific liaison for both of them. But just to be on the safe side, because he loved her very, very, very much, he took to sleeping in the lumpy Volkswagen bed at the edge of the forest. And every morning, because he was compelled to rise when the sunlight struck his face out there in the open, he would trek back to their fine home in the middle of the forest, and he would make her morning tea and heat and butter a muffin, or possibly pour her a bowl of banana nut crunch cereal, or sometimes a nice bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon or brown sugar sprinkled across the surface, and carry it into her as she sat up in bed reading or watching the home shopping channel. And for 8 years, she had been absolutely safe from the nightmares that ripped and rent and savaged everything in sight. He slept at the brim of obscurity, and he was a danger to no one but himself. And whatever means he used to protect himself from those dark time sojourners, well, it was an armory kept most secret. And that was how they lived for 8 years. And every night she would go barefoot in her shift, and she would follow the 27 plugged-together extension cords, each one 30 feet long, that led from the house to his night light, and she would come to him and kiss him goodnight. And they would tell each other how happy they were together, how much every moment together meant to them, and they would kiss goodnight once more, and she would go back to the house. And he would lie reading for a time and then go to sleep. And in the night, there at the shore of fog, at the edge of the awful sea of mist, the nightmares would come and scream and tear at themselves, but they never got anywhere near Susan, who was safely in her home. So as she had done every night since they had met, she followed the extension cords down through the sweet-smelling, wind-cooled hedges and among the whispering, mighty trees to his bed. The light was on. An apple ready to be nibbled sat atop a stack of books awaiting his attention. The intaglio of a tesseract, or possibly a dove on the wing, lay in the center of a perfectly circular depression in his pillow where he had rested his head. But the bed was empty, and she went looking for him. And after a time, she found him sitting on the shore of fog, looking out over the brim of obscurity. But she heard him crying long before she saw him. The sound of his deep, heartfelt sobbing led her to him. And she knelt beside him, and he put his arms around her, and she said, "I see now that I've made you unhappy. I don't know how, but I can see that I've come into your life and made it unpleasant. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." But he shook his head and continued to shake it, to say, no, that isn't it. You don't understand. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying, because she didn't understand what it meant, his shaking his head like that, until finally he was able to stop crying long enough to say, no, that isn't it. You don't understand." "Well, then what are you crying about?" And he wasn't able to tell her for a while, because just trying to get the words out started him up all over again. But after a while, still holding her, there at the brim of obscurity, which in an earlier time had been known as the rim of oblivion, he said softly, "I'm crying for the loss of all the years I spent without you, the years before I met you, all the lost years of my life. And I'm crying that there are less years in front of me than all those lost years behind me." And out in the roiling ocean of misty darkness, they could both hear the sound of roving, demented nightmares whose voices were now, they understood, less filled with rage than with despair.
This week is Army of Darkness. Now, this is the third in a series of Sam Raimi films that started back in 1983 with Evil Dead. Now, actor Bruce Campbell has starred in all of these films, but he says Army of Darkness was the most fun.
Yes, swallow this.
Actor Bruce Campbell and a slew of Deadeye warriors are lined up and ready to regale the legion of Evil Dead fans in Sam Raimi's long-awaited Army of Darkness.
Army of Darkness picks up exactly where Evil Dead 2 left off, of a poor sap stranded in time with no hope of survival.
Now, let's talk about how I get back home.
Campbell plays Ash, an incompetent space traveler forced to confront evil 13th century forces. But the actor believes imperfections allow for propitious plot twists.
I like the fact when heroes are vulnerable. You know, the thing that bugs me in adventure movies when they're trying to be realistic, that the guy always has to be an ex-cop or an ex-CIA or an ex-specialist. Show me a guy who's a CPA who's stranded on a battleship that's taken over by terrorists, and then I'll be interested. You know, then I'll be worried.
Though Campbell is the fleshy star of the movie, his cadaverous co-stars, created by the makeup effects wizards at K&B, will undoubtedly bask in the limelight as well.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
When you're dealing with a rotted skeleton, we kind of just made them look rotted, and you saw bones and flesh hanging off. We did accentuate their brows a little bit, like in the old Ray Harryhausen movies, where his skeletons always had this kind of evil brow to them.
Get the hell out of here!
Darkness's $12 million budget was a big improvement over Evil Dead 1's $350,000 tab, but still modest by today's cost-swelling standards. Yet director Raimi managed to attract a top-notch cast and crew for the job.
The main reason was it was a sword and sorcery film with skeletons that come to life and fight King Arthur and his men and knights in armor, and there's sword play and all that kind of stuff. And as kids, we all grew up on that kind of, you know, Sinbad and Jason the Argonauts type movies, and we all totally were into it. We're like, oh, great, we get to make armor and we get to have skeletons that sword fight, and this is going to be cool.
After rounding up some of Hollywood's best and brightest effects people, Raimi concentrated on achieving an epic look on a non-epic budget.
He'll mash everything into his frame, from the top, from the bottom, give me poles with flags on them. There's a hole in the middle, he'll put a flag there. You know, it's all filling it in. So he just shovels in all these visuals, and it adds up for a big sensory input.
Army of Darkness isn't splattered with the carnage and mayhem of its predecessors, but Campbell hopes audiences are no less affected by Sam Raimi's unsubtle blend of humor and horror.
I was at a screening in New Orleans, and a guy, he'd go, ha, 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 oh! And he'd get really tormented because he didn't know whether he should scream or laugh, and it was the weirdest thing watching this guy. He didn't know what to do, and I thought, that's good. We really torment this. Because Sam's theory, only he can really expound on this, but is you must punish the audience.
So if you're up for an agonizingly satisfying time, Army of Darkness is ready to deliver.
Another place you can see actor Bruce Campbell is on a new Fox TV series called The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. And like his character Ash, his Evil Dead persona, it's kind of the same character in this particular series. It is an action-adventure series with a touch of fantasy, and again, it airs on Fox beginning August 27th.
Next week's Sci-Fi Buzz will celebrate a birthday for the great Ray Bradbury. Inside the cottage industry known as ElfQuest, what the wizards of K&B Effects do behind the scenes, and the life of legendary actor and makeup genius Lon Chaney.
This is Mike Jarek reminding you to get your daily minimum requirement of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and you'll grow up just like me.